and they came up with remains of apparently of a white woman, and who had a hatchet or something going on. And it was actually in the Boone County Recorder about 1911. So they attribute all this to him deciding that he wanted to not necessarily get a divorce, but make it so he was eligible to get married once again. And so, so they blame her death on him. Now, keep in mind there were a lot of people buried down in Petersburg. And so it may not have actually been a white woman. It may have been some sort of Native American woman, and for some reason they thought she was white, you know, because there are burials all along Front Street down there. But anyway, so that's just a little side story. Kind of fun, isn't it? Petersburg is really quite cool. So there was a cannery on 1st and Grant Street, and so this is a photograph of that. Actually, you are looking at, trying to think of which way we're going. You're actually looking towards the river at this point. And so you have Grant Street, and then trying to think which direction we're going on that. I'm going to have to think for a minute, because it's no longer standing. So you have a big open field, and then you have a little ranch house there now. Petersburg is kind of interesting because it's had so many phases of life, you know, and the town has looked so different over, you know, the centuries. I mean, if you think about it, you had a Native American village there, okay? And then within 100 years of that, then you go ahead and you have a station, just, you know, a wooden structure, you know, that they were trying to barricade from Shawnee and the raids. You know, and then by 1818, you have John Flournoy, and you have the town gridded out on top of all that. Okay? And then so you have this thriving town that went on through the 1830s, 1840s, all the way up to the late 1890s. And then it went through a bit of decay. And so they were taking parts of the town, deconstructing it, and using those bricks to build new houses. So there's new houses that were never there, made of bricks from other buildings that are gone. And so you have all these different phases of this life of this town. And so the Jenkins Roller Mills is another one of those buildings. A smaller building still stands, but this was a flour mill on the riverbank. And it was opposite of the distillery. So you have the distillery on one end of town, and you have the roller mills on the other end of town. J.C. Jenkins is a known abolitionist, okay? He was a rumored abolitionist for a very long time. He built his house, and I don't think his house is in here, the big white house on top of the hill in Petersburg, the beautiful, beautiful house. That was built at the beginning of the Civil War, and it was completed in April of 1861. He had one family of slaves living with him. But the slave quarters were right on the same floor as the family quarters, and actually right next to the master bedroom. You just went down this little hallway, and there you are. I was able to go in that building maybe about 3 years ago with the previous owners, and there is actually a hidey hole. It's about 6 feet high with a trap door from the slave quarters down. Okay, and the way this house is structured, okay, you've got this big, huge, maybe 25-foot high foyer with this huge staircase. It's beautiful. But tucked in the corner, okay, is in the wall is a closet and a closet door. You open the closet door and it has a lowered ceiling. So you have 10, 12-foot high ceilings in all the rest of the building. And then you have a 7-foot high ceiling, or a 6-foot high ceiling in that closet. And so I've been upstairs, I've looked down, I've been downstairs, and I've looked up, and there's a hidey hole. Now, he also had a tunnel that went from his downstairs basement to the river, okay? Now, people use tunnels all the time to get supplies up to their houses when they lived up on the hills. No one ever built a tunnel, supposedly, for the Underground Railroad. okay? But they used what they had. Now, the entrance to this tunnel is on the other side of this roller mill. This roller mill stands, that was built the same year as the house, stands in between the town proper and that tunnel entrance. So we think, we speculate, we don't know for sure, although I have to say, having a hiding hole in the middle of your house is a pretty good indication that you're doing something that you don't want other people to know about. And so we think that part of this, I mean, he was a great businessman, but part of this was kind of like a ruse to kind of hide the fact that he was pulling people across the river. Now, we know in the Lawrenceburg area, okay, was a major stop on the Underground Railroad, okay? The only way to get through Lawrenceburg on the river, because of the way Boone County is constructed. Remember, Lawrenceburg is about at, what, mile 20? At Petersburg, in 39 miles of riverfront. You have to go way out of your way to get into Lawrenceburg and not go through Boone County. So we know there's connections. We just don't know what they all are yet. We can't identify them. We now think there's a connection up in the Sand Run North Bend area, but we're just coming up with that information like in the last few months. But so we think that's why this roller mill was important, because it was just kind of suspicious that all this was going on at the same time. So the Petersburg Distillery. The distillery is what made Petersburg from about 1830, 1835 on. It was owned by William Snyder, and then it went through several owners, and especially during the Civil War. And this picture was taken probably 1880s, 1890s, okay? And at one time, this was the largest distillery in the region. It was huge. It is no longer standing. It's a big hole in the ground. They had at one time, let me see my other, at one time they had 10 warehouses, the big processing unit, a building, and several other supporting buildings out there. It was big. And most of brick you see in Petersburg now was taken from the distillery to build these buildings circa 1900, 1910. So this is the Levi J. Workham, docked in Cincinnati. Levi Workham actually owned the distillery, and about 1900. And this is from University of Wisconsin photograph. So basically, they would fill all that bottom storage area of that boat with whiskey barrels, and they'd ship them upstream to Cincinnati. They'd ship them downstream, you know, past Louisville into St. Louis and beyond. That's a lot of alcohol, guys. A lot. So Petersburg, even though you go down there now and it's kind of a quiet little town, okay? They had taverns. They had 2 large taverns. They had stores. They had a booming population, and it was at one time the biggest town in Boone County. So if you can just imagine that, and then imagine how it is now, and how really how river travel and the lack of river travel now really kind of took away from Petersburg what it was. As we go down river, okay, so we're going down past Split Rock and we're going to Bellevue, okay? Bellevue is a pretty little town. It also has lost quite a bit of its front streets, okay? And recent demolition has taken a lot of the old homes that used to be along there. It was actually established in 1815 by Colonel Edward Meeks and called Mount Vernon. It was renamed Grant after the Grant family in 1869. The family, John Grant, his family also owned property down there, down by Bellevue, down by Macville. And so their main family cemetery is actually between Macville and Bellevue. And then it was converted to Bellevue or Bellevue Bottoms in 1883. And that was to kind of distinguish it from Bellevue and Campbell County. Okay. There have been some talk about why they would call it Bellevue. It is a high point on the river, on the Boone County side. And so one of the stories is, I don't know how true it is, but one of the stories is that, you know, early on when there were Indian raids on the river, they, at the highest lookout points, they would have a bell and they would have a tower, watchtower, and then they would ring that bell to let the settlers know that there were Native Americans, Shawnee, raiding across the river. I don't know how true that is. It's logical that they would do something like that, but, you know, I mean, how far are you going to really hear, you know, I mean, they're not going to hear you in Petersburg, you know, they're not going to hear you too far down the way. But that's the story behind the name. It is also a gridded town, and it's in pretty good shape, actually. They still have the Kelly School down there. The riverfront is pretty much taken out, but it looks like the town is actually kind of picked up and moved across 18. It used to be that 18 would dead end right into the ferry at the road, at the river. But now kind of makes that right angle turn. Recent information has told us that Silas Dinsmore, who is a relative of James Dinsmore, his uncle actually, Kathy Kelpie has found information that Silas was actually had his vineyard on an island. And we're going to talk about the island in a minute, because there's only one island in that area. And so, and then we'll also talk about Macville, that was established by the Mcmullen brothers in 1881. And so it's a recent town. It's a little town, but they had a warehouse, they had a store, they had a ferry crossing. And it's much more known for Dam 38. So before we get into the dam, let's talk about Lawfree Island. Okay, the island that we think Silas Dinsmore actually had his vineyard and his cabin on. Okay, we think, because there's not that many islands out there, and it was a big island. It was a lot bigger than it is now. I rode past it on a boat this past fall, and it's even much smaller than it was. I mean, they're losing a lot of land out there. But it was this huge island in between Indiana and Boone County, okay? And it was actually Lawfree's defeat. It was actually named after Archibald Lawfree and kind of mangled into Lawfree, okay? He was he was a Pennsylvania militiaman during the Revolutionary War, okay? And he had a troop of soldiers that were coming out with him, okay? And he was supposed to meet up with George Rogers Clark, who apparently was not a patient man. He never liked waiting around for anybody. He didn't want to wait for these Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania men to get down river to meet with him. So he set off and up the Great Miami without them. He basically left a note saying, here are your supplies, come catch up with me when you can. Well, unfortunately, the Shawnee and kind of met up with him first. And there was a massacre on the island. For some reason, they were bivouacked on the island, and the Shawnee came out and the other Native American troops came out and massacred most of the 110 men. And the rest of them, they took prisoners and traded them to the British. So if George Rogers Clark just waited a few more days, you know, maybe these men wouldn't have died. But actually, a few of the men actually came back and settled in the area. But this is a lithograph from 1895 talking about this famous battle. And so they're standing on the Indiana side, and there's the island. And here's the island, what it looks like now. So this is coming from Rabbit Hash, coming down the hill towards Mcmullen and Bellevue, and you see that in the center section there, that beautiful, beautiful island. That's what remains of Lawfree Island today. You guys doing okay? I know there's a lot of slides. There's a lot of history in Boone County. What can I say? So some of the stuff that was found in Bellevue, you can see that Green V. Mcmullen, he was a contractor and builder, and also dealer in leaf tobacco and a wharf master. So he pretty much ran the show down there. Corbin, dealer in dry goods and groceries. The public will do well to call on me before purchasing elsewhere. W.W. Grant from the Grant family, blacksmithing and wagon making, horseshoeing, a specialty. So these are some of the businesses. There was quite a few businesses down there. This is the Bellevue store, also known as the Ansley store. And I believe it's not standing any longer, but it was down there. You can see the fuel tanks. The Mcmullen family in Macville. This is Evangeline and Marion Mcmullen, about 1890. And so they look pretty dapper, pretty well off. If you have to be pretty well off if you want to start your own town, I think. So down there now, or down there was, dam number 38, okay, the Macville Dam. And it was finished about 1926, and it was a big dam, and it stretched between Indiana and Boone County. And what it did was it solved all these extreme fluctuations in the river. So the pool was about 9 feet at this point after the dam was built. That's when the dam was in use. The property is now privately owned. After the Mcmullen Dam went in about, what, 63? These dams were decommissioned, both 37 at Fern Bank and then the 38. So, and